My name is Melissa, and I grew up in a family where beauty meant everything. My mom used to say that good looks opened doors, while my dad believed that only marketable people succeeded in life. From as far back as I can remember, I was told in 1,000 different ways that I was not the pretty one. My older sister Emma had been born with the golden ticket, blue eyes, shiny hair, perfect smile, and she basked in the kind of attention I could never dream of. When neighbors came over, Mom would beam and say, "Isn't Emma just gorgeous?" and then look at me and sigh. "Melissa, you should learn a few things from your sister." I used to nod and smile, pretending it didn't sting, but every word carved itself deep into my memory. Family gatherings were always performances, with Emma at center stage and me playing the silent background character no one applauded. Whenever we took pictures, Mom would whisper, "Step a little to the side. Melissa, you're throwing off the balance," and then force a smile for the camera. Hey viewers, before we move on to the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories like this. Once, when I asked why there weren't any solo pictures of me around the house, she said, "Honey, you know we just don't have enough frames." But I saw the truth. The walls were covered in photos of Emma's trophies, Emma's birthdays, Emma's perfect smile. I didn't belong in their version of a happy family. At school, things weren't better. Kids picked up on my awkwardness, on my desperate attempts to shrink away from attention. They called me Shadow Girl or Ghost Sister, and somehow those nicknames stuck. I tried telling my mom once about the teasing, hoping she'd comfort me, but she just rolled her eyes and said, "You're too sensitive, Melissa." My dad laughed and added, "Maybe if you stopped hiding behind those books, people would actually notice you." The thing was, books were my only escape. They were the one place I didn't have to be compared to Emma. But even that became a joke in our house. "Professor Melissa," my dad would call from the living room whenever he wanted to tease me. "You think all that studying will make you beautiful." Everyone laughed, except me. I just smiled tightly and excused myself to my room, where I could cry quietly without anyone seeing. By the time I was in high school, I had accepted my role, the invisible daughter. Emma was a cheerleader, homecoming queen, and local celebrity. Every weekend, there were parties or photo shoots for her pageants. My mom adored the attention, dressing her up like a doll, while I sat on the couch in oversized sweaters doing homework. Mom would look at me and sigh, "You could try, Melissa. You don't even make an effort anymore." I wanted to scream that I was trying, just not in the way she valued. My effort was in surviving. My effort was in staying kind, even when no one was kind to me. But none of that mattered to them. To them, I was a disappointment in plain clothes. Then came my senior year, the year everything broke. I had spent months studying, applying for scholarships, dreaming about going to college, and finally building a life where I could breathe. But my parents didn't see it that way. "Why waste money on college?" my mom said when I brought it up. "You'll never survive out there, Melissa. You're too shy, too plain." My dad chimed in, "College won't teach you how to be likable." They thought they were being realistic. I saw it for what it was, cruelty disguised as advice. Still, I didn't give up. I worked part-time at a diner after school, saving every dollar. Sometimes I'd come home smelling like fries and grease, and Mom would wrinkle her nose. "You'll never meet anyone working in a place like that," she said. "At least Emma has standards." Graduation day was supposed to be the proudest moment of my life. I was valedictorian, standing at the top of my class. When I stepped on stage to give my speech, I searched for my parents in the crowd. They were there, sitting next to Emma, who was taking selfies and barely clapping. After the ceremony, I rushed over to them, still holding my diploma, smiling like a fool, hoping, just once, to hear them say they were proud. Mom looked at me up and down and said quietly, "Maybe skip the pictures. Honey, you'll thank me later." Dad chuckled, "Yeah, no need to immortalize this outfit. You look tired." They both laughed. I wanted to vanish. That was the exact moment I realized that no amount of achievement would ever change how they saw me. Later that night, Emma posted dozens of photos from graduation, all of her smiling, surrounded by friends. In one picture, you could see me in the background, blurry, holding my speech. The caption read, "Proud of this moment for my family," but there was no mention of me at all. My mom commented, "Our beautiful daughter," and I stared at the screen for hours, feeling something inside me harden. That night, I decided that I would never again beg for their approval. When my acceptance letter from the university arrived, I showed it to them at breakfast. Mom glanced at it for a second, then said, "That's far away, Melissa. Maybe it's for the best." Dad added, "Distance might make you prettier." They laughed again, and I folded the letter carefully, holding back tears. I knew then that they didn't plan to help. I tried to ask for a small contribution for tuition, and Mom exploded. "We're not wasting our money on something that will only embarrass the family." My dad nodded. "We don't want you shaming us out there, Melissa. You're not ready for the real world." That sentence, "We don't want you shaming us," cut through me like a knife. I went to my room, locked the door, and cried until my throat hurt. But even through the sobs, a quiet resolve began to grow inside me. If they didn't want me to carry their name with pride, I would build a life where their opinions no longer mattered. The day I left for college was cold and gray. I had one suitcase, a backpack, and $200 saved from tips. No one came to help me pack. Emma slept in, and my parents didn't even walk me to the car. As I stood at the door, Mom handed me a grocery bag with some leftovers and said, "Don't embarrass yourself out there, Melissa." Dad added, "The world's not going to be kind to someone like you. Just don't come crawling back when you realize we were right." I didn't answer. I just turned, walked to the bus stop, and didn't look back. College felt like another planet. For the first time, no one compared me to anyone else. No one told me to hide from cameras or lose weight. My roommate, Jenna, was loud and confident, and she didn't understand why I flinched every time someone gave me a compliment. When she said, "You have the prettiest eyes," I laughed nervously and said, "You don't have to lie." She frowned and said, "Why would I lie?" That night, for the first time, I looked in the mirror and tried to see what she saw. It wasn't easy. Years of being told I was ugly had trained me to look for flaws. But little by little, I started to believe that maybe I wasn't broken. Maybe I'd just been raised to think I was. Money was tight, but freedom was intoxicating. I worked at a bookstore near campus, and sometimes the manager let me take home old paperbacks. I filled my dorm room with them, stacks of stories about people who survived worse and still found hope. I studied late into the night, fueled by cheap coffee and stubborn determination. When I got straight A's that first semester, I wanted to call home and tell them, but then I remembered my father's voice saying, "College won't teach you how to be likable," and I closed my laptop instead. Holidays were the hardest. Everyone went home for Thanksgiving, and I stayed on campus alone. Once, I saw Emma's photos online, the whole family smiling around the dinner table. The caption said, "So thankful for my amazing parents," and I just stared at it, wondering if they even remembered I existed. But instead of crying, I made myself a cup of tea, curled up with a book, and whispered, "You're okay, Melissa." And somehow I was. By junior year, things started to change. I got an internship at a tech company and a small scholarship for academic excellence. My professors noticed my work, and people began to seek my advice. One day, after I presented a research project, a classmate named Daniel came up to me and said, "You're incredible at this." I froze, waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. He just smiled. For the first time in my life, I felt seen, not as a shadow or a joke, but as someone who mattered. Still, every now and then, my past caught up with me. My mom sent the occasional email, usually to brag about Emma's latest achievement. Emma just bought her first house. Emma's expecting. Emma won a local beauty award. There was never a "How are you, Melissa?" or "We're proud of you." I stopped opening them after a while. After graduation, I landed a good job and moved to another city. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I decorated my small apartment with secondhand furniture, potted plants, and string lights. When friends came over, they said it felt cozy. I laughed, because for me, home had never meant comfort before. Every milestone felt like rebellion. Every small success whispered, "You did this without them." And maybe that's what kept me going. I didn't need revenge. I didn't even need an apology. I just wanted to build a life that proved their words wrong. Sometimes, when the city was quiet at night, I'd look out the window and think about that girl who stood at the bus stop with a grocery bag of leftovers and a heart full of hurt. She was still a part of me, but she wasn't the whole story anymore. I had become someone else. Someone who didn't need to be told she was enough, because she finally knew it. I never planned to become anyone special. I just wanted to stop feeling like the version of me my parents created. After graduation, I moved to a small apartment in the city and got a job as a junior analyst at a company that barely paid enough to survive. But for the first time, I woke up without that heavy feeling of failure pressing on my chest. No one here knew me as the ugly daughter or Emma's sister. I was just Melissa, the quiet girl who worked hard and always said thank you when someone held the elevator door. My boss, Clara, was one of those people who radiated calm confidence. She used to say things like, "You're good at what you do, stop apologizing for existing." And it always made me laugh awkwardly, because that's exactly what I'd been doing my whole life, apologizing for existing. The first year was hard. I lived paycheck to paycheck, ate noodles more often than I'd like to admit, and battled constant waves of insecurity. Every time someone complimented my work, my brain whispered, "They're just being nice." But slowly, something inside me started to shift. I joined a local book club just to have some human contact outside work. The first night, I almost didn't go in. I stood outside the cafe door for 5 minutes convincing myself that no one wanted me there. When I finally walked in, a woman named Mia smiled and waved. "You must be Melissa." I froze for a second, surprised she remembered my name from the group chat. "Come sit," she said, and the warmth in her voice melted something in me. That night we laughed about bad romance novels and drank cheap coffee until closing time. When I got home, I caught myself smiling in the mirror, not because of how I looked, but because for the first time, someone had seen me and wanted me around. Work became my safe place. I threw myself into projects, staying late to learn everything I could. Clara started giving me more responsibility, and once she said, "You remind me of myself when I started, quiet but unstoppable." That word, unstoppable, stuck with me. I wasn't used to being described as anything powerful. I was used to being told I was too much or not enough, depending on the day. Now, I began to see glimpses of a version of myself I'd never met before. The one who didn't shrink when someone looked at her. The one who didn't measure her worth against anyone else's reflection. A couple of years passed like that, quietly, steadily, beautifully. I built friendships, confidence, and small routines that made me happy. Sunday mornings at the farmer's market, journaling in the park, calling Mia just to share random thoughts. I even started mentoring high school girls in a local STEM program because I knew how it felt to be told you weren't good enough. One of them, a shy 15-year-old named Aria, once said, "You talk like someone who never gets scared." And I laughed so hard because if only she knew. But maybe that was the point. I had learned how to be scared and still move forward. Then one day, everything changed again, but in a good way. My company got a chance to partner with a foundation that supported women in technology. Clara asked me to help lead the project. I hesitated. "Me? I don't think I'm ready." She smiled. "You're more than ready, Melissa." Those words hit me harder than I expected. No one had ever said that to me. Not as a parent, not as a teacher, not as anyone. So I said yes. The project took months of planning, long nights, and endless emails. We created workshops, mentorships, and a small scholarship fund for young women from low-income families. When the program finally launched, the local newspaper wrote an article about it. It wasn't supposed to be about me, just the work, but somehow my name ended up in the headline. Melissa Carter leads local initiative empowering women in STEM. I didn't even know it was published until Mia sent me the link with 10 exclamation marks. "Look at you, superstar," she texted. I laughed and said, "It's not a big deal." But inside, I was trembling. Not out of fear, out of disbelief. The next morning, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "From your mother." My hands went cold. It had been years since I'd heard from her directly. I opened it, heart pounding. She wrote, "We saw the article about you. We're so proud, Melissa. We always knew you'd do something special." I had to read it twice because it didn't sound real. The same woman who once said, "We don't want you embarrassing our family," was now claiming pride in me. The rest of the email talked about how things hadn't been easy for them, how Dad's health wasn't great, how Emma was going through a rough patch. It ended with, "Maybe we can reconnect soon." I sat there staring at the screen for what felt like hours. There was a part of me that wanted to scream, to ask where they were when I needed them most. But another part, the quieter, healed part, just felt tired. I didn't reply. Instead, I went to the park that evening and watched the sunset. The city buzzed around me, full of strangers, full of life. I thought about how much energy I'd spent trying to be loved by people who couldn't see past their own idea of perfection. And now, suddenly, they wanted to rewrite the story as if they'd always believed in me. It didn't make me angry. It just made me free. Weeks passed, and I kept working, smiling, living. My program grew. We got more sponsors, more students, more impact. Every success felt surreal. Sometimes Clara would tease me, "You realize you're kind of a big deal now," and I'd laugh, shaking my head. Fame didn't matter. What mattered was that I'd become the kind of person I needed when I was 16. Then, one night, I got another message, this time from Emma. The subject line said, "Hey, it's been a while." Her email was shorter, almost hesitant. "I don't know if you'll read this, but Mom told me about your project. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I was awful to you. I was just a kid, but I knew what I was doing. I hope you're happy, Mel. I read it over and over. My heart hurt, not from anger, but from something gentler. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if I wanted to say anything at all. For days, I thought about that message. I remembered every cruel joke, every photo I wasn't invited into. Every night, I cried myself to sleep while she and Mom laughed downstairs. And yet, when I pictured her, I didn't see the girl who hurt me. I saw the girl who had been molded by the same parents who once told me, "You'll thank us later for being honest." Maybe she'd just believed them longer than I had. So I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either. I just kept it, a small, silent truce. By my 30th birthday, I had everything I once thought was impossible: peace, friends, stability, and quiet pride. I didn't need their voices in my head anymore. But life has a strange sense of timing. Around that time, our foundation received an invitation to present at a national conference. My team was ecstatic. "Melissa, you have to give the speech," Mia said. I laughed nervously. "Me? No way." But Clara insisted. "This is your story. People need to hear it." I agreed, reluctantly. When the day came, I stood on a stage in front of hundreds of people, lights shining, heart pounding. I talked about growing up in a world where beauty mattered more than kindness, where intelligence was mocked, and how I learned to redefine what success looked like. I didn't name names, but I told the truth. Sometimes, I said, you have to become the person your younger self needed. And sometimes, that means letting go of the people who couldn't love you then, even if they want to now. The audience went silent for a moment, then erupted into applause. I smiled, not for validation, but because I finally felt whole. Later that evening, after the conference, I checked my phone. There was a voicemail from my mother. Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered. "We watched your speech, Melissa. You looked beautiful." Your father cried. I closed my eyes, listening. Then she said softly, "We're sorry, honey. We didn't know better back then. Please call us." I didn't. Not because I hated them, but because I didn't need to anymore. That night, I sat by my window again, city lights flickering like tiny stars, and whispered to myself, "You did it, Melissa." The words echoed in the quiet room, and for once, they didn't sound like a wish. They sounded like the truth. Years had passed since the day I stood on that conference stage, and life had quietly turned into something beautiful. I had a husband now, Aaron, a man who taught me what unconditional love really feels like. He wasn't loud or dramatic. He was calm, steady, and patient in a way that felt like sunlight after a storm. The first time I told him about my parents, about Emma, about how I grew up believing I was unworthy, he just took my hand and said, "You don't have to prove anything to anyone anymore, Melissa." That moment stayed with me. For years, I had built my life around self-reliance, around never needing anyone's approval again. But with Aaron, I learned that love could be soft, that it could exist without conditions. Our days were simple and full. We cooked together, went for walks, laughed about little things. He always called me sunshine because, as he put it, "You spent too long living in someone else's shadow." Sometimes I still woke up from dreams of my past, my mother's voice telling me I'd never be enough, but now there was warmth beside me, a hand that always reached back when I reached out. Aaron never tried to fix me. He just made space for me to heal. One morning, while we were having breakfast, I opened my email and froze. The subject line said, "It's Mom." My stomach twisted. I hadn't heard from her in months. The message was short, shaky, and raw. "Your father is sick. He had a heart problem, and things are difficult." I didn't know who else to reach out to. "I know we hurt you, Melissa. I'm so sorry. Please, can we talk?" I sat there in silence, reading it over and over. Aaron looked at me softly. "It's okay if you don't want to reply," he said. I nodded, but deep down I knew I couldn't ignore it. No matter what they had done, they were still my parents. And time, no matter how much of it passes, doesn't erase that. That evening, I sat by the window with my phone in my hand for almost an hour before finally calling. When she answered, I heard her breath catch. "Melissa, oh my God, it's you," she said, crying. I stayed quiet for a few seconds before whispering, "Hi, Mom." The silence that followed was heavy and fragile. Then I heard my father's voice in the background, tired, faint, trembling. "Is that really my girl?" I swallowed hard. "Yeah, Dad, it's me." We talked for a long time that night, about small things mostly: his health, the neighborhood, my work. He apologized once, softly, almost like a confession. "I was too hard on you, sweetheart. I didn't know better." I said, "It's okay, Dad." And for the first time in my life, I meant it. Over the next few weeks, we began to talk more. Little by little, The years of silence started to fade. Mom asked about my life, about Aaron, and I told her the truth, that I was happy, that I was safe, that I'd built a life where love wasn't a reward but a language. She cried and said, "You sound so strong, Melissa. I always knew you'd find your way." I almost laughed at that. It was such a strange, backward comfort, but I let it be. People change slowly, and sometimes their words arrive decades too late. One day, during one of our calls, Mom mentioned quietly, "The hospital bills are piling up. I hate talking about money, but it's been so hard since your father stopped working." I could hear the exhaustion in her voice, not manipulation, not guilt, just real fear. I didn't answer right away. That night, after Aaron and I had dinner, I told him everything. "I want to help," I said, "but I can't go back to being their savior. Not like before." He nodded and said, "Then help them your way, Melissa, quietly, without losing yourself." So I did. I found the hospital's community payment system online and made a donation to cover several of the bills. I used a different email address and didn't leave my name. When I clicked submit, I felt both peace and sadness. Peace because I could finally give without needing recognition. Sadness because it took me this long to feel safe enough to care. A few days later, Mom called me, crying with joy. "You won't believe it. Someone paid for part of your dad's treatment. Out of nowhere. Can you imagine? God works in mysterious ways." I smiled and said softly, "That's wonderful, Mom. I'm so happy to hear that." She sniffled and said, "It feels like an angel was watching over us." I looked at Aaron across the room, and he mouthed, "You are that angel." I just shook my head and smiled through tears. Weeks turned into months. Dad's health slowly improved. Sometimes he called just to tell me about the birds outside the window or how he started painting again. "You'd laugh if you saw my work," he said once, chuckling. "I drew your mother, but she says it looks like a potato." I laughed so hard I cried. "I'm just glad you're drawing again, Dad." I said, "I am too, sweetheart," he replied. Every conversation felt like a small repair, not perfect, but enough to hold the cracks together. Mom softened too. She started saying things she never could before. "I didn't know how to love you right, Melissa. I thought being tough was helping, but it only pushed you away." I told her, "I know, Mom. I've learned a lot since then." Sometimes she still slipped back into old habits, little comments about appearance, about success, but I didn't let them hurt me anymore. I had new armor now, made of patience and self-respect. Aaron met them over a video call once. Mom wiped her eyes and said, "He looks so kind, Melissa." Aaron smiled and said, "She's my favorite person in the world, ma'am." Mom actually laughed, a soft, genuine sound I hadn't heard since I was a child. Dad said, "Take care of my girl, young man," and Aaron replied, "Always." When the call ended, I sat there for a while, tears in my eyes, and Aaron just held me quietly. "You did this," he whispered. "You turned pain into peace." Months later, Dad passed away peacefully in his sleep. Mom called me in the morning, her voice breaking. He went with a smile, "Melissa. He said he loved you before he closed his eyes." I closed mine too and whispered, "I love you too, Dad." The words came out steady, not broken like before. They felt whole, like something that had finally come full circle. A few weeks after the funeral, Aaron and I drove to my hometown. The house looked smaller, older, but somehow softer too. When Mom opened the door, she just stood there staring before bursting into tears. "You came," she cried. "Of course I did, Mom," I said, hugging her tight. Inside, the living room walls were still covered in family photos, but now, among them, was a framed newspaper clipping of me and Aaron from an article about our foundation. "That's my daughter," she said proudly, touching the frame with trembling fingers. For once, I didn't feel the need to correct her, to remind her of everything that came before. I just smiled. That evening, we sat at the old kitchen table drinking tea. The same house that once held so much pain now felt like a memory of survival. "You know," Mom said softly, "sometimes I think about what I said to you back then, and I can't believe it came from me. You deserved so much better." I took her hand and said, "It's okay, Mom. We both learned." She nodded, tears glistening, and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." I smiled. "I didn't do it for you, Mom. I did it for me." That night, back home, I lay in bed next to Aaron. The city outside was glowing, quiet. He whispered, "You okay?" I nodded. "Yeah," I said softly. "For the first time, I really am." I closed my eyes and thought about my father, my mother, the girl I used to be, and the woman I'd become. I'd learned that love doesn't always come from the people who should have given it first, but when it finally finds you, it teaches you how to give it back without losing yourself. And as I drifted to sleep, Aaron's hand in mine, I whispered into the dark. I helped them, I forgave them, and I still kept myself. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't surrender. It was peace. What do you think about this story? Let me know in the comments, drop a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories.